The stack of papers hit our kitchen table with a sharp slap that made my coffee mug jump. My father, Robert, stood there arms crossed while my mother, Patricia, glared at me from beside the stove. Sarah leaned against the doorway with that smug expression I had grown to hate. "Here's the deal, Lincoln," Dad announced. "Either you watch Madison and Chloe every single day after work plus weekends, or you pay $3,600 rent starting next month. Market rate is $3,600. Your family discount ends now." I stared at those papers like they contained my death sentence. $800 versus $3,600. Free childcare versus financial freedom. My stomach twisted as the weight of their ultimatum settled over me like a heavy blanket on a hot summer night. How had it come to this? 2 years ago, moving back home seemed like the smartest decision I had ever made. At 28, I was a software developer with a decent salary, but housing costs in our city had skyrocketed beyond belief. Renting my own place would have cost at least $2,800 monthly, and I desperately wanted to save for a house down payment. My parents had seemed genuinely happy to have me back, and the $800 I paid covered utilities and helped with groceries. It felt like a win for everyone involved. Then, Sarah showed up 6 months later with her twin 5-year-old daughters, Madison and Chloe. Fresh from her divorce, she claimed she needed temporary help getting back on her feet. Mom and Dad welcomed her with open arms, setting up the guest bedroom with bunk beds for the girls. Sarah promised she would find work quickly and move out within a few months. That was 18 months ago. What started as occasional babysitting while Sarah went on job interviews had gradually morphed into daily childcare responsibilities. Every morning before work, I helped get the girls ready for kindergarten. Every evening, I picked them up from after-school care, helped with homework, made dinner, and supervised bath time. Weekends meant taking them to parks, birthday parties, and playdates, while Sarah mysteriously had appointments that always seemed to involve coming home with shopping bags or smelling like restaurant food. The girls were sweet kids, and I genuinely cared about them. Madison loved building elaborate Lego castles and could spend hours creating intricate designs. Chloe was the artistic one, constantly drawing pictures of unicorns and rainbows that she proudly displayed on the refrigerator. But caring for 2 energetic 5-year-olds was exhausting, especially after 10-hour workdays debugging code and attending endless meetings. Sarah's job search appeared to consist mainly of scrolling through her phone and complaining about how difficult it was to find good work. She had a bachelor's degree in marketing, but every opportunity was either beneath her standards or the schedule didn't work with her lifestyle. Meanwhile, she somehow always had money for new clothes, professional manicures, and frequent lunch dates with friends. My parents enabled this behavior completely. Mom constantly praised Sarah for being such a devoted mother during a difficult transition. Dad admired her resilience in the face of adversity. They treated my concerns about the arrangement like I was being petty and selfish. When I suggested Sarah might need more structure in her job search, they accused me of not understanding the challenges single mothers face. The breaking point had been building for weeks. Last Tuesday, Sarah announced she needed me to watch the girls because she had a crucial interview. I rearranged my work schedule, left an important client meeting early, and spent the evening helping with math homework and reading bedtime stories. The next morning, I discovered Sarah's Instagram photos from what was clearly a fancy dinner date, not a job interview. When I confronted her, she laughed it off. "I did have an interview earlier that day," she claimed. The dinner was just networking. But her stories never added up, and my parents always took her side whenever I raised questions. Tonight's ultimatum felt like the final betrayal. As I sat there processing their words, I began recording the conversation on my phone. Something about this situation felt wrong beyond just family dynamics. The numbers didn't make sense either. If market rate was $3,600, and they claimed I was getting a family discount at $800, that suggested our house was worth over $4,000 monthly in rental income. But I knew the property values in our neighborhood, and nothing justified that price. Let me understand this correctly. I said slowly, keeping my voice steady. You want me to provide full-time childcare for Madison and Chloe, which would normally cost hundreds of dollars weekly, or pay almost 5 times my current rent. That's exactly right, Patricia replied firmly. We've been more than generous with the arrangement so far, but Sarah needs reliable help with the girls, and we can't keep subsidizing your housing when you could be contributing more to this household. Sarah's smirk widened. It's really not that much to ask, Lincoln. The girls adore you, and it would give me the flexibility I need to focus on finding the right career opportunity. Think of it as an investment in our family's future. The manipulation was so blatant, I almost laughed. An investment in our family's future. Right. More like an investment in Sarah's ability to avoid responsibility, while I sacrificed my evenings, weekends, and any chance of building my own life. But I kept my expression neutral. This is a big decision. I need time to think it through properly. You have until tomorrow morning, Robert declared. We need your answer before Sarah's week starts. Either way, we need to know our financial situation going forward. As I headed to my basement room that night, my mind was already working. Something about this entire setup felt orchestrated, planned. The timing, the ultimatum, the specific dollar amounts. This wasn't a spontaneous family discussion about fairness. This was a calculated move designed to corner me into a specific outcome. I spent the night documenting everything I could remember about the past 18 months. Sarah's behavior, my parents' changing attitudes, the financial arrangements, the household dynamics. The more I wrote, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't about helping family or sharing responsibilities. This was about exploitation, pure and simple. And I was done being the victim. The next morning, I approached the situation like the problem-solving exercise it actually was. While my family assumed I was wrestling with their ultimatum, I was systematically investigating the foundation of their claims. 28 years of living with these people had taught me that their stories rarely held up under scrutiny. My first stop was the local property tax website. Public records showed our house was assessed at $450,000. In our neighborhood, rental properties typically commanded between $18 and $22 per square foot annually. Our 3-bedroom house was approximately 1,900 square feet, which meant realistic market rent would be around $2,800 to $3,200 monthly, not the $3,600 my parents claimed. But that was just the beginning. While they attended church that Sunday morning, I conducted a thorough examination of the basement where I lived. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The space had been converted into a living area without any permits whatsoever. No electrical inspections, no plumbing permits, no building code compliance. The electrical work was amateur at best, with extension cords running behind drywall and outlets that sparked occasionally. The ceiling height was barely 6 feet 8 inches, which didn't meet residential requirements. The single window was too small and high to serve as an emergency exit. This wasn't just an informal family arrangement. This was an illegal rental unit that could result in serious fines and legal consequences if discovered by city inspectors. My parents were charging me rent for a space that violated multiple housing codes and safety regulations. My investigation expanded to their financial situation. Mail left carelessly on the kitchen counter revealed far more than they intended. Credit card statements showed balances totaling over $80,000 across 7 different accounts. The mortgage payment was $3,800 monthly, not including property taxes and insurance. Utility bills averaged $600 monthly during winter months. Even more disturbing were the notices from the county tax assessor. They were 4 months behind on property taxes owing over $11,000, including penalties and interest. A certified letter from their mortgage company discussed missed payments and potential foreclosure proceedings. My $800 monthly rent, combined with my contributions to utilities and groceries, was apparently keeping them barely afloat financially. But the math still didn't work. Even if I paid $3,600 monthly, they would still be struggling with their debt load and living expenses. Monday afternoon, I visited the public library and spent 3 hours researching tenant rights, illegal rental units, and tax implications of family housing arrangements. What I learned made me realize how deep this deception ran. By claiming me as a dependent on their tax returns, while simultaneously charging me rent, my parents were committing tax fraud. The IRS considers rent payments as income, but dependent status requires providing more than half of someone's support. They couldn't legally claim both benefits. Even worse, I discovered they had been claiming childcare tax credits for Madison and Chloe's expenses, while I provided free babysitting services. They were essentially getting paid by the government for childcare costs they weren't actually incurring. This constituted benefits fraud on multiple levels. Tuesday evening, I called a tenant rights attorney, recommended by the State Bar Association. The consultation was supposed to last 30 minutes, but stretched to over an hour as I explained the situation. Attorney Jennifer Walsh listened with growing amazement as I detailed the illegal rental unit, the financial coercion, and the tax fraud implications. "Mr. Johnson," she said finally, "you're not just a tenant in an illegal unit. You're a victim of systematic fraud. Your parents have been violating housing codes, tax laws, and potentially criminal statutes. The child care coercion adds another layer of labor exploitation." She explained that I had grounds for multiple legal actions. The illegal rental unit meant I could demand return of all rent payments, plus penalties. The tax fraud could result in federal charges against my parents. The labor coercion might constitute a form of family exploitation that could involve social services. But more importantly, Jennifer continued, "You have significant leverage in this situation. They need you far more than you need them. Your rent payments are apparently keeping them from foreclosure, and your free childcare is enabling ongoing fraud. Walking away would expose them to enormous financial and legal consequences." Wednesday night, I started putting together my exit strategy. First, I opened a new bank account at a different institution and transferred most of my savings. Then, I began researching apartments focusing on studios and one-bedroom units within my budget. Several options looked promising, and I scheduled viewings for the upcoming weekend. But the real breakthrough came Thursday evening when I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Sarah was talking on her phone in the backyard, apparently believing everyone else was occupied. I heard her side of a conversation that made my stomach drop. "No, Trevor, he hasn't decided yet, but I think the pressure is working," she said, walking back and forth on the patio. "Mom and Dad are totally on board with the plan. They really need either his money or his babysitting to keep things together financially." A pause while she listened to the other person. "Exactly. Once he agrees to watch the girls full-time, I can quit this stupid under-the-table job at the salon and focus on us. And if he chooses to pay the higher rent instead, well, at least Mom and Dad can catch up on their bills." Another pause. "The best part is, either way we win. If he takes the babysitting option, I get freedom, and you get to see how good I am with kids before we move in together. If he pays the higher rent, they'll have enough money to let me stay here long-term while we plan our future." My hands clenched as the pieces fell into place. Sarah had orchestrated this entire ultimatum as part of a scheme with her boyfriend Trevor. She had been working cash jobs while collecting unemployment benefits, which explained her mysterious income. The ultimatum wasn't about fairness or family contributions. It was about manipulating me into subsidizing her lifestyle while she planned her next relationship. But she wasn't finished. "I've been setting it up perfectly," Sarah continued. "I've been telling Mom and Dad that Lincoln complains constantly about helping with the girls and acts like he's doing us some huge favor. They're starting to see him as ungrateful and entitled." The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. For months, I had been questioning my own feelings, wondering if I was being selfish for resenting the childcare responsibilities. Meanwhile, Sarah had been systematically poisoning my relationship with our parents, painting me as the problem while positioning herself as the struggling single mother who deserved our family support. Friday morning, I made my decision. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I wasn't going to choose between financial exploitation and labor exploitation. I was going to expose the truth and walk away from this toxic situation entirely. But first, I needed to gather enough evidence to protect myself and potentially help Madison and Chloe, who were innocent victims in this mess. If Sarah was committing unemployment fraud and manipulating family dynamics this severely, what kind of mother was she really? Those little girls deserved better than being used as pawns in their mother's schemes. The game was about to change completely, and my family had no idea what was coming. Saturday morning, I decided to give Sarah one final opportunity, to be honest. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for everything I had discovered. Maybe we could find a solution that didn't involve destroying our family relationships entirely. I found her in the living room scrolling through her phone while Madison and Chloe watched cartoons. The girls were still in their pajamas at 11 o'clock, their hair uncombed, and their faces sticky from the donuts Sarah had given them for breakfast. No nutritious meal, no morning routine, just sugar and screen time. "Sarah, can we talk privately about the situation with Mom and Dad?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral and non-confrontational. She looked up with that familiar expression of mild annoyance. "What's to discuss? They gave you a fair choice. Either help out with your nieces or pay market rate rent like any other adult would. I don't see why this is so complicated." "Let's walk outside," I suggested. "The girls don't need to hear adult conversations." We stepped onto the front porch, and I closed the door behind us. The morning air was crisp, and neighbors were beginning their weekend yard work. Normal families living normal lives, unaware of the drama unfolding in our house. "Sarah, I need you to level with me," I began. "This ultimatum feels orchestrated. The timing, the specific amounts the way Mom and Dad presented it. It seems like someone convinced them this was necessary." Her laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Oh, please. You think I'm some mastermind manipulating our parents? They came to this conclusion on their own, Lincoln. They're tired of you taking advantage of their generosity, while contributing the absolute minimum to this household." Taking advantage. The words came out harsher than I intended. I pay rent. I help with utilities. I buy groceries, and I've been providing free childcare for your daughters for over a year. How exactly am I taking advantage? "You pay $800 to live in a space that would cost $3,000 anywhere else," she replied, crossing her arms. "And watching the girls occasionally hardly qualifies as full-time childcare. Occasionally, Sarah, I pick them up from school every day. I help with homework, make dinner, supervise bath time, and read bedtime stories. On weekends, I take them to parks and activities while you have mysterious appointments that seem to involve shopping and restaurant meals." Her expression shifted slightly, but she maintained her defensive posture. "I'm trying to network and find career opportunities. That requires meeting people and maintaining professional relationships. You wouldn't understand the challenges of rebuilding your life after a divorce." "Then help me understand," I said, pulling out my phone. "Help me understand why you posted Instagram photos from an expensive restaurant the night you claimed to be at a job interview." The color drained from her face. "You've been stalking my social media." "I've been trying to figure out why your stories never add up. Job interviews that turn into dinner dates. Networking events that look suspiciously like girls' nights out. Appointments that always result in new clothes or professional manicures." Sarah's facade began cracking. "My personal life is none of your business." "It becomes my business when you're using my free labor to subsidize whatever you're actually doing with your time," I replied. "And it definitely becomes my business when you're manipulating our parents into issuing ultimatums designed to benefit your lifestyle." For a moment, she looked genuinely caught. Then her expression hardened into something I had never seen before. "You want to know the truth?" "Lincoln, fine. You're right. I did suggest to Mom and Dad that this arrangement needed to change. Because you're in the way." "In the way of what?" "My future," she said bluntly. "I've been seeing someone, And it's getting serious. Trevor wants us to move forward together, but there's no space for that while you're occupying the best room in this house." The basement room was hardly the best space available, but I let her continue. "He's successful, stable, and ready to commit to building a life with me and the girls. But he needs to see that I can manage household responsibilities and create a comfortable home environment. Having my brother hovering around questioning my every move and competing for our parents' attention makes that impossible. So this ultimatum is about getting rid of me so your boyfriend can move in." "Partially," she admitted. "But it's also about you learning to carry your own weight. You've been coasting on family generosity for 2 years while building your own savings account. Meanwhile, I'm genuinely struggling to restart my career and provide for my daughters." "Struggling Sarah, where are you getting money for new clothes, restaurant meals, and professional manicures? Because it's clearly not from job interviews." She hesitated, then decided to go all in. "If you must know, I've been doing some freelance marketing work. Cash jobs here and there. Nothing major but enough to cover personal expenses. While collecting unemployment benefits." Her pause told me everything. "That's temporary, just until I find permanent employment." "That's fraud, Sarah. You're required to report all income to the unemployment office." "Don't lecture me about regulations," she snapped. "You're living in an illegal rental unit and claiming ignorance about housing codes. We're all making compromises to survive." Now we were getting somewhere. "What else aren't you telling me?" She studied my face, apparently weighing how much truth to reveal. "Fine. You want complete honesty. Trevor has been helping with some expenses. And yes, we're planning a future together. He's got a good job in finance. And he's ready to take on the responsibility of a family. But he needs to see that I can create a stable home environment. And my presence prevents that." "Your presence complicates everything," she said. "Trevor sees a grown man living in his parents' basement, dependent on family support, and wonders what kind of family dynamics he's getting involved with. Plus, the girls are too attached to you. They need to bond with Trevor as their potential stepfather figure." The manipulation was breathtaking. "So you convinced our parents to issue an ultimatum designed to force me out, so your boyfriend can evaluate you as potential wife material." "I convinced them to finally address a situation that wasn't working for anyone," she corrected. "You get to choose whether you want to step up as a real uncle or step aside as an independent adult. Either way, this family moves forward. And if I choose to pay the higher rent, then you're contributing fairly to household expenses, and Trevor and I can take our time planning our next steps. The girls get stability, our parents get financial relief, and you get to feel good about supporting your family. What if I choose the childcare option?" Her smile was cold. "Then you'll be too busy with real responsibilities to interfere with adult relationships and decisions. Plus, you'll finally understand what single parents face every day." I stared at this person who shared my DNA, but seemed like a complete stranger. "You've thought this through very carefully." "I've had to," she replied. "Nobody else was going to advocate for what's best for my daughters and my future. Sometimes you have to create opportunities instead of waiting for them to appear." "One more question," I said. "Have you been taking money from my room?" Her expression flickered. "What are you talking about?" "Small amounts. 20 here, 40 there. Cash that I thought I misplaced or miscounted." "You're being paranoid." "Am I? Because I started keeping track 3 weeks ago, and exactly $60 has disappeared from various places in my room." The silence stretched between us. Finally, she shrugged. "Maybe you should be more careful with your money. Or maybe you should stop leaving cash lying around where anyone could pick it up." Not a denial. Not even a convincing deflection. Just blatant admission wrapped in victim blaming. "You've been stealing from me to make it look like I'm irresponsible with money." "I've been teaching you a lesson about security and responsibility," she said. "Consider it preparation for real-world living." The conversation was over. Whatever relationship we had once shared as siblings was completely destroyed. Sarah wasn't just manipulating our parents or exploiting my labor. She was actively sabotaging my reputation and stealing my property to support her schemes. But now, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. No more hoping for reasonable solutions or family reconciliation. No more wondering if I was being unfair or ungrateful. Sarah had declared war on my place in this family, and she had convinced our parents to be her allies. Time to show her what real strategic thinking looked like. Sunday afternoon, while my family attended Sarah's friend's baby shower, I began documenting everything systematically. If this situation was going to end in legal action, I needed evidence that would hold up under scrutiny. My years in software development had taught me the importance of thorough documentation and systematic problem solving. First, I created encrypted digital folders on my personal laptop, completely separate from any shared family devices. I photographed every relevant document I could access, starting with the illegal basement rental unit, the exposed electrical work, the inadequate ceiling height, the missing emergency egress, the unpermitted plumbing modifications. Each photo was time-stamped and included measurements taken with a digital measuring tape. Next, I documented the financial evidence. Photographed pages from credit card statements left on the kitchen counter, copied account numbers, and balances from letters accidentally left open, and recorded details about the overdue property taxes and mortgage payment issues. The pattern was clear. My parents were drowning financially, and my rent payments were keeping them barely afloat. Monday morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day conducting comprehensive research. The county clerk's office provided detailed property records going back 15 years. What I discovered was shocking. My parents had refinanced their home 6 times in the past decade, each time pulling out equity to cover mounting debts. Their current mortgage balance was $420,000 on a house they had originally purchased for $280,000. The pattern suggested chronic financial mismanagement rather than temporary hardship. Credit applications, loan modifications, and debt consolidation agreements painted a picture of people consistently living beyond their means while making increasingly desperate financial decisions. At the state unemployment office, I filed an anonymous tip about potential benefits fraud, providing Sarah's full name, Social Security number, and details about her unreported cash income. The form indicated investigations typically took 4 to 6 weeks, with penalties including immediate termination of benefits and repayment of fraudulent amounts. Tuesday afternoon, I met with attorney Jennifer Walsh for a follow-up consultation. She reviewed my documented evidence with growing interest and concern. Mr. Johnson, this situation is far more serious than typical family disputes, she explained. Your parents are operating an illegal rental unit while committing tax fraud. Your sister is committing unemployment fraud while potentially endangering her children's welfare. You have grounds for multiple legal actions, but you also have leverage for negotiated solutions. What kind of leverage? Your parents need your rent money to avoid foreclosure, but they're charging you illegally and claiming fraudulent tax benefits. Your sister needs your free labor to continue her fraud, but she's also created evidence of systematic deception. If you walk away and report these violations, everyone faces serious consequences. What would those consequences look like? Jennifer consulted her notes. For the illegal rental unit, city fines typically start at $5,000 plus daily penalties until violations are corrected. For tax fraud involving dependent claims and childcare credits, federal penalties can include repayment of false benefits, plus fines up to $25,000. For unemployment, fraud state penalties include repayment plus fines, and criminal charges are possible for amounts over $10,000. The numbers were staggering. What about the children I don't want Madison and Chloe to suffer because of their mother's choices? That's where Child Protective Services becomes involved, she replied. If a parent is committing fraud that impacts household stability, or if children are being used as pawns in manipulation schemes, CPS can intervene to ensure their welfare and safety. Wednesday evening, I visited 3 different apartments, settling on a studio unit in a building 12 miles away. The rent was $1,400 monthly, but it included utilities and came furnished with basic appliances. Most importantly, it was available immediately, with just first month's rent and a security deposit. I signed the lease that night, providing a move-in date of the following Monday. The timing would give me the weekend to transport my belongings without arousing suspicion. Thursday brought an unexpected discovery that changed everything. While organizing my documentation, I overheard another phone conversation between Sarah and Trevor. This time, I positioned myself deliberately to hear both sides of the discussion. "The deadline is tomorrow morning," Sarah was saying. "Either he agrees to full-time babysitting or he pays the higher rent. Either way, we get what we need." Trevor's voice was clear through the phone speaker. "And if he chooses the babysitting option, then I quit the salon job and focus on getting my real estate license. The girls will be taken care of, and I'll have freedom to build a proper career." "What about the unemployment benefits?" "I'll transition off those gradually. Nobody needs to know the exact timing. And if he chooses the rent option, then we have extra money to work with while planning our next move. Your place is too small for all 4 of us long-term, but with Lincoln paying market-rate rent, my parents can afford to let us stay here while we save for something bigger." Trevor paused. "What if he refuses both options?" Sarah laughed. "He won't. I've been setting this up for months. He thinks of himself as the responsible one, the good son. He won't abandon his family in a financial crisis, and he won't risk damaging his relationship with mom and dad." "You've been planning this for months." "Since before we started dating seriously," she admitted. "I knew that having Lincoln in the picture would complicate any future relationship. He's too involved with the girls, too integrated into the household dynamics. Any man I brought into this situation would have to compete with my brother for influence and attention." The calculation was breathtaking. Sarah hadn't just recently decided to manipulate the situation. She had been systematically undermining my place in the family from the moment she started planning her future with Trevor. But Trevor's next question revealed an even deeper level of deception. "What about the money you've been taking from his room? Are you sure that was necessary?" "Completely necessary," Sarah replied. "Mom and Dad needed to see concrete evidence that Lincoln was irresponsible and couldn't be trusted. Missing cash, along with my stories about his complaints and attitude, convinced them that he was taking advantage of their generosity." $60 seems like a small amount to risk getting caught. "Small amounts are harder to track and easier to dismiss as misplacement," she explained. "If I had taken larger amounts, he might have reported it to police or demanded a formal investigation. This way, it just looks like carelessness on his part." The conversation continued, revealing more details about their manipulation strategy. Sarah had been systematically poisoning our parents' perception of me, while positioning herself as the struggling single mother who deserved family support. She had timed the ultimatum to coincide with our parents' most serious financial stress, ensuring they would be motivated to accept her proposed solution. But the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. "Once Lincoln is out of the picture, I'll have complete access to Mom and Dad's financial information," Sarah continued. "They trust me to help manage household expenses, and they'll need someone reliable to handle paperwork and bill payments. Are you thinking about power of attorney arrangements?" Eventually, they're getting older, and their financial situation is clearly beyond their ability to manage effectively. With Lincoln gone, I'll be their primary family support system. It makes sense for me to have legal authority to help them make better decisions." The scope of Sarah's planning was terrifying. This wasn't just about getting rid of me to make room for her boyfriend. This was about positioning herself to control our parents' finances and property for the long term. Friday morning, I made copies of all my evidence and prepared detailed reports for multiple agencies. The IRS would receive documentation of the tax fraud. The state unemployment office would get additional details about Sarah's unreported income. Child Protective Services would receive information about the children being used in manipulation schemes. The city housing department would receive documentation of the illegal rental unit. But I also prepared a different kind of documentation. Video recordings of myself explaining the entire situation, time-stamped, and stored in multiple secure locations. If anything happened to me, or my evidence, these recordings would ensure the truth came to light. The weekend would be my final chance to execute a clean exit strategy. By Monday morning, my family would discover that their carefully planned ultimatum had backfired completely. They had assumed I would choose between two forms of exploitation. Instead, I was choosing freedom, justice, and the protection of two innocent children who deserved better than being used as pawns in their mother's schemes. The nightmare they were about to experience would be entirely of their own, making a direct result of choosing greed and manipulation over genuine family relationships. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather and the sound of my father mowing the front lawn. The normalcy felt surreal considering the storm I was about to unleash on our family. My parents expected my decision by morning, unaware that I had been planning my exit for days. I began moving my belongings in stages using the cover of routine weekend activities. A gym bag full of clothes during my usual Saturday morning workout. A box of books and electronics during a supposed trip to donate old items to charity. Important documents and valuables secured in my car trunk while running errands. The strategy required careful timing. My parents typically spent Saturday afternoons visiting my grandmother in her assisted living facility. Sarah usually took the girls to the park or shopping while enjoying her weekend freedom from responsibilities. This left the house empty for several hours. At 2 o'clock, I rented a small moving truck and recruited my friend Marcus to help with larger items. Marcus worked in cybersecurity and understood the importance of digital evidence preservation. He had also witnessed enough of my family drama over the past year to support my decision completely. "Are you sure about this approach?" he asked as we loaded my desk and dresser. "Once you drop those reports Monday morning, there's no going back." There was no going back the moment Sarah started stealing from me to frame me as irresponsible, I replied. This family chose manipulation over honesty. They created this situation, not me. We worked efficiently, clearing out 18 months of accumulated belongings within 3 hours. My new studio apartment wasn't large enough for everything, so some items went into a storage unit across town. By 5 o'clock, my basement room looked exactly as it had when I first moved in, except for one addition. I left detailed letters for each family member explaining my decision and providing copies of the evidence I had gathered. The letters were placed in sealed envelopes on my former desk, along with my house keys and final rent payment. The letter to my parents was the most difficult to write. "Mom and Dad, by the time you read this, I will have moved out permanently. Your ultimatum forced me to choose between financial exploitation and labor exploitation, but I'm choosing neither. I've discovered that our family arrangement involved illegal rental practices, tax fraud, and systematic deception. The attached documentation explains everything. I hope someday we can rebuild our relationship based on honesty rather than manipulation." Lincoln. Sarah's letter was more direct. "Sarah, your plan worked perfectly. I'm out of your way, and you can pursue your future with Trevor without interference. However, your unemployment, fraud, theft, and child exploitation will be reported to appropriate authorities Monday morning. Madison and Chloe deserve better than being used as pawns in manipulation schemes. I hope you learn to put their welfare above your personal ambitions." Lincoln. The letters to Madison and Chloe were the hardest. "Dear Madison and Chloe, Uncle Lincoln had to move to a new place, but I want you to know that I love you both very much. You are smart, beautiful, wonderful girls who deserve adults who put your happiness and safety first. Remember to always tell the truth and treat others with kindness. I hope to see you again when circumstances are better. Love, Uncle Lincoln." Sunday passed in careful preparation. I organized digital copies of all evidence onto encrypted drives stored in secure cloud locations with delayed delivery settings. If anything happened to me, the evidence would automatically be sent to law enforcement agencies within 72 hours. I also prepared comprehensive reports for each relevant agency. The IRS report detailed my parents' fraudulent tax filings, including dependent claims while charging rent and childcare credit claims while receiving free babysitting services. The state unemployment office received detailed documentation of Sarah's unreported cash income and fraudulent benefit claims. Child Protective Services received information about children being used in manipulation schemes and potential neglect issues. The City Housing Department would receive complete documentation of the illegal basement rental unit, including photographs, measurements, and evidence of code violations. This report alone could result in immediate condemnation of the space and substantial fines. Sunday evening brought an unexpected development. While my family attended a birthday dinner for one of Sarah's friends, I overheard Trevor arriving early to pick up something Sarah had forgotten. He used his own key to enter the house, confirming that he already had unrestricted access, despite not officially living here. I recorded him moving through the house, opening mail addressed to my parents, and examining financial documents left on the kitchen table. His behavior suggested a level of familiarity and entitlement that supported my suspicions about Sarah's long-term planning. But the most damning evidence came when Trevor discovered my former room was empty. Instead of confusion or concern, his reaction was satisfaction. He immediately called Sarah. "It's done," he said simply. "Lincoln's gone. All his stuff is cleared out." Sarah's excited response was audible through the phone. "Perfect. That means he took the higher rent option rather than deal with ultimatum pressure. We can start planning the room renovation for when I move you in." "Are you sure he took the rent option? There are letters on his desk." "Probably just dramatic nonsense about feeling unappreciated," Sarah dismissed. "The important thing is he's gone, and we won't have to deal with his interference anymore." Their premature celebration provided the final piece of evidence I needed. This entire scheme had been orchestrated to remove me from the family home so Trevor could move in. The ultimatum about childcare versus rent was just manipulation, designed to make their goals seem reasonable. Monday morning, I arrived at my new apartment building at 6 o'clock and waited for business hours to begin. At 8:30 sharp, I hand-delivered comprehensive evidence packages to 5 different agencies. Each delivery was time-stamped and receipt confirmed, creating an official record of my reporting. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division received a 50-page report documenting my parents' tax fraud, including estimated dollar amounts and supporting documentation. The State Unemployment Fraud Hotline received detailed information about Sarah's unreported income and falsified job search records. Child Protective Services received reports about children being used in manipulation schemes and evidence of potential neglect. The City Housing Department received complete documentation of the illegal rental unit, including professional photographs and code violation assessments. This report was flagged as urgent due to safety concerns about electrical and structural issues. By 10 o'clock Monday morning, I had officially reported every illegal activity I had discovered. The investigations would begin immediately, and my family would face consequences for years of fraudulent behavior. But I also sent one final communication. A text message to my parents' cell phones sent from an anonymous number. "Your ultimatum has been answered. Check Lincoln's former room for complete explanation. All relevant authorities have been notified about illegal activities. You have 72 hours to consult legal counsel before interviews begin. The children's welfare is now the priority." Then I turned off my personal phone, activating a new number they didn't have access to. Whatever happened next, I would not be available for manipulation threats or attempts at reconciliation until they faced the full consequences of their choices. My family was about to discover that their carefully planned manipulation had backfired catastrophically. The nightmare they were about to experience was entirely of their own creation, a direct result of choosing greed and deception over honest family relationships. The real question was whether they would learn from these consequences or continue blaming everyone except themselves for the destruction they had caused. My phone buzzed with 17 missed calls by noon Monday, but I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I monitored the situation remotely through a security camera app I had quietly installed in the basement room weeks earlier. The small wireless camera, disguised as a smoke detector, provided live video feed of my family's reactions to discovering my departure and the evidence I had left behind. The first scream came from my mother at approximately 11:15. She had gone to the basement to collect laundry and found my empty room with the letters arranged on the desk. Her anguished wail echoed through the house, bringing Robert and Sarah running downstairs. I watched through the camera as Robert tore open his letter with shaking hands, his face growing pale as he read the contents. Sarah grabbed her own letter, scanning it quickly before dropping it like it was on fire. The color drained from her face as the full implications hit her. "He knows everything," she whispered, sinking onto my former bed. "The unemployment benefits, the cash jobs, the money I took from his room. Everything." Robert was studying the documentation I had provided, page by page. "Patricia," he called to my mother, "how much money did we claim in childcare credits last year?" "About $3,000, she replied shakily. "Why does that matter?" "Because Lincoln was providing free childcare while we claimed those expenses," Robert said grimly. "That's fraud. Federal fraud." The reality was starting to sink in. I watched Sarah frantically calling Trevor, pacing back and forth while explaining the situation. His response was apparently not supportive, because she began crying within minutes of starting the conversation. "What do you mean you need time to think about us?" she sobbed into the phone. "This doesn't change anything about our relationship. It's just a family misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion." But Trevor's voice was audible through the speaker, and his words were devastating. "Sarah, you told me your brother was the problem in your family. You didn't mention anything about unemployment fraud, tax fraud, or stealing money. I can't get involved with someone facing criminal charges." The phone went silent. Trevor had hung up on her. At 12:30, the first official visitors arrived. 2 investigators from the state unemployment office, followed closely by a city housing inspector. I watched my parents' panic escalate as they realized this wasn't a family dispute that could be handled privately. This was a multi-agency investigation into criminal activity. The housing inspector spent 2 hours in the basement, documenting every code violation with photographs and measurements. The illegal electrical work alone was sufficient to condemn the space immediately. The inadequate emergency egress and unpermitted plumbing modifications added thousands of dollars in potential fines. Meanwhile, the unemployment investigators interviewed Sarah for over 3 hours, questioning her about reported income job search activities and benefit claims. She tried to minimize her cash work at the salon, claiming it was just occasional help for friends, but the investigators had detailed evidence of regular payments spanning 8 months. By Tuesday morning, the situation had escalated beyond anything my family could have imagined. Federal investigators from the IRS Criminal Division arrived with search warrants seeking documentation related to tax fraud claims. They seized financial records, computer hard drives, and filing cabinets full of documents. The search revealed even more fraudulent activity than I had originally discovered. My parents had been claiming home office deductions for Sarah's supposed job search activities, despite her not conducting legitimate job search efforts. They had also been claiming educational expense credits for courses Sarah never actually attended. The total amount of fraudulent tax benefits exceeded $45,000 over 3 years, pushing the case into felony territory. Federal penalties for tax fraud at this level included potential prison time, not just fines and repayment. Wednesday brought Child Protective Services, investigators responding to my reports about Madison and Chloe being used in manipulation schemes. The investigators interviewed the girls separately, documenting their living conditions and assessing their welfare. What they discovered was heartbreaking. Madison told investigators that Mommy was always worried about money and cried a lot when Uncle Lincoln wasn't home. Chloe explained that Uncle Lincoln helped with homework and made dinner, but Mommy was too busy with phone calls to help with school projects. The children's statements revealed a pattern of emotional neglect and instability that supported my concerns about their welfare. While they weren't in immediate physical danger, their emotional needs clearly weren't being met adequately. By Thursday, the financial consequences were becoming clear. The city housing department had condemned the basement rental unit, requiring immediate cessation of all rental activities and payment of fines totaling $12,000. The illegal electrical work posed fire hazards that required professional remediation before the space could be used for any purpose. The unemployment fraud investigation had resulted in immediate termination of Sarah's benefits and demands for repayment of over $18,000 in fraudulent claims. Additional penalties and interest brought the total amount owed to nearly $25,000. But the most devastating blow came Friday afternoon. The mortgage company alerted to the ongoing legal investigations initiated immediate foreclosure proceedings. With my rent payments gone and mounting legal expenses, my parents had missed their most recent mortgage payment, triggering acceleration clauses that made the entire loan balance immediately due. They owed over $400,000 on a house they could no longer afford to maintain, with legal penalties and fines that exceeded their annual income. Bankruptcy appeared to be their only option, but even that wouldn't resolve the criminal charges they were facing. Sarah's situation was equally dire. Trevor had formally ended their relationship, unwilling to associate with someone facing criminal fraud charges. Her unemployment benefits were terminated. Her cash job at the salon was no longer sufficient to cover basic expenses, and she faced potential jail time for the unemployment fraud. More importantly, Child Protective Services had recommended supervised visitation pending resolution of the fraud charges. Madison and Chloe were temporarily placed with their father, who had been fighting for increased custody rights for months. Sarah's manipulation and fraud had cost her the thing she claimed to care about most: her children. The letters I had left were being analyzed by handwriting experts as part of the criminal investigation, but more damaging were the recorded conversations I had provided to investigators. Sarah's admissions about stealing money from my room, committing unemployment fraud, and using her children in manipulation schemes were recorded evidence that would be difficult to dispute in court. By the end of the week, my family's carefully constructed house of cards had completely collapsed. The ultimatum they had given me, designed to force me into continued exploitation, had instead exposed years of fraudulent activity and destroyed their financial stability entirely. They had expected me to choose between paying higher rent or providing free childcare. Instead, I had chosen justice, and that choice had revealed the true cost of their greed and manipulation. The nightmare they were experiencing was entirely self-inflicted, a direct consequence of prioritizing personal gain over honesty and genuine family relationships. Every penalty they faced, every consequence they endured, was the result of choices they had made repeatedly over years of fraudulent behavior. Justice was being served, but more importantly, 2 innocent children were being protected from continued exploitation and instability. Madison and Chloe would finally have the chance to grow up in an environment that prioritized their welfare over adult manipulation schemes. 6 months later, I sat in my comfortable one-bedroom apartment, having upgraded from the studio, when my lease renewal came up. The morning sunlight streamed through windows that were actually at ground level in a building that met all safety codes and didn't violate a single housing regulation. My coffee tasted better, knowing I was paying fair market rent for a legal living space. The final court hearings had concluded 3 weeks earlier, bringing resolution to the criminal cases that had consumed my family for months. The outcomes were exactly what the evidence had predicted, but watching my parents and Sarah face the consequences of their choices still felt surreal. My father, Robert, received 2 years probation and was ordered to repay $37,000 in fraudulent tax benefits, plus penalties and interest that brought the total to over $50,000. My mother, Patricia, received 1 year probation and shared responsibility for the financial penalties. At their age, this debt would follow them for the rest of their lives. Sarah faced the harshest consequences. Her unemployment fraud conviction resulted in 6 months in minimum security prison, followed by 2 years probation and repayment of $28,000 in fraudulent benefits. The theft charges for money she had taken from my room added additional fines and extended her probation period. More significantly, she lost primary custody of Madison and Chloe. Their father, David, had been fighting for years to gain more access to his daughters, but Sarah's manipulation and instability had complicated his efforts. My reports to Child Protective Services provided the evidence he needed to demonstrate that the girls needed a more stable environment. The girls now lived with David during the week and spent supervised weekends with Sarah. David had remarried a woman named Jennifer, who worked as an elementary school teacher and genuinely cared about the children's welfare. For the first time in years, Madison and Chloe had consistent routines, help with homework, and adults who prioritized their needs over personal drama. I had been allowed supervised visits with my nieces once the investigations concluded. David understood that I had acted to protect the children, and he appreciated my efforts to expose the fraud and manipulation they had been subjected to. The girls had adapted well to their new living situation and seemed happier and more stable than I had ever seen them. Uncle Lincoln. Madison had said during our most recent visit, "Daddy and Jennifer help us with homework every night, and we don't have to worry about Mommy being sad anymore." Chloe had added, "And we get to eat vegetables with dinner, not just donuts for breakfast." Their innocent observations revealed how much their previous living situation had been affecting them. They deserved the stability and care they were finally receiving. My parents had been forced to sell their house to pay legal fees and tax penalties. The foreclosure process had accelerated once the criminal charges were filed, but they managed to negotiate a short sale that minimized additional debt. They now rented a small 2-bedroom apartment in a senior housing complex, living on Social Security and part-time work that barely covered their basic expenses. The illegal basement rental unit had been permanently closed by the city, and future property owners would have to invest thousands of dollars to bring it up to code if they ever wanted to use it for rental purposes. Robert had attempted to contact me several times through mutual friends, expressing regret for the ultimatum and hoping we could rebuild our relationship. His messages suggested he still didn't fully understand that the ultimatum was just the final symptom of years of enabling and manipulation. Patricia had sent a letter through my grandmother, apologizing for not recognizing how Sarah's behavior was affecting the family dynamics. She claimed they had been too trusting and too focused on helping Sarah through a difficult time to notice the manipulation and fraud. But Sarah's attempts at reconciliation were the most telling. Her letters from prison focused primarily on how the investigation had ruined her life and destroyed her relationship with Trevor. She claimed the theft from my room was just borrowing that she intended to repay, and the unemployment fraud was a misunderstanding about reporting requirements. Even facing the consequences of her actions, Sarah remained focused on herself rather than the children she had used as pawns or the family relationships she had destroyed through systematic deception. I didn't respond to any of these attempts at communication. The damage to our family relationships was too severe and too deliberate to repair with simple apologies. They had chosen manipulation over honesty repeatedly for years, and genuine change would require acknowledgement and accountability that none of them seemed capable of providing. Instead, I focused on building the life I had been working toward before their ultimatum derailed my plans. My savings account, protected from their financial crisis, allowed me to make a down payment on a small condominium in a safe neighborhood with good schools. The mortgage payment was less than what they had demanded in rent, and I finally owned property instead of subsidizing someone else's fraudulent lifestyle. My software development career had flourished without the constant stress of family drama and manipulation. A promotion 6 months earlier came with a substantial salary increase and the flexibility to work remotely several days each week. I had even started dating someone I met through a hiking club, a relationship built on honesty and mutual respect rather than exploitation and deception. The emotional healing had been more challenging than the financial recovery. Therapy helped me understand how my family's manipulation had affected my ability to trust others and set appropriate boundaries. Learning to prioritize my own needs without feeling guilty required months of work with a counselor who specialized in family exploitation cases. But the most satisfying outcome was knowing that Madison and Chloe were thriving. David sent occasional updates about their progress in school, their involvement in extracurricular activities, and their adjustment to a household that operated with consistent rules and genuine care for their well-being. The girls were learning to trust adults again, to expect stability instead of chaos, and to understand that their worth wasn't dependent on their usefulness to manipulative schemes. They were developing into confident, happy children who would never have to wonder whether their caretakers had ulterior motives. Justice had been served not just through legal consequences, but through the restoration of healthy family dynamics for the people who mattered most. 2 innocent children were finally receiving the love, stability, and protection they deserved. The life lesson from this experience was profound, and lasting family relationships built on exploitation and manipulation will always eventually collapse under the weight of their own deception. Enabling harmful behavior doesn't help anyone. It just delays the inevitable consequences while allowing more damage to accumulate. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish when others are systematically taking advantage of your generosity. Setting boundaries isn't cruel when those boundaries protect innocent people from being used as pawns in adult manipulation schemes. Sometimes walking away is the only way to teach people the true value of what they've been taking for granted. Sometimes protecting yourself is the first step toward protecting others who can't protect themselves. Most importantly, genuine family relationships are built on mutual respect, honesty, and support for each other's growth and well-being. Anything less than that isn't really family at all. It's just people sharing DNA while engaging in systematic exploitation. My family learned these lessons the hard way, through legal consequences, and lost relationships that could have been preserved if they had chosen honesty over manipulation from the beginning. I learned these lessons by finding the courage to walk away from toxicity and build a life based on authentic values and healthy boundaries. The nightmare they experienced when they discovered my departure was entirely of their own, making a direct result of years of fraudulent behavior and manipulative choices. But that nightmare also created the opportunity for genuine healing and growth for everyone involved, especially 2 young girls who finally had the chance to experience what real family love actually looks like. Have you ever faced a situation where family members tried to exploit your generosity or manipulate you into accepting unfair treatment? How did you handle it? And what advice would you give to others dealing with similar family manipulation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else recognize the signs of exploitation and find the courage to protect themselves. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming difficult family situations and building healthier relationships. And share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing about how setting boundaries and demanding accountability can actually protect the people we love most. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting others who are working to break free from toxic family dynamics. Remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and honesty, and it's never too late to start demanding better treatment from the people in your life. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.